China's warning to Australia. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.heise here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee. Let's have a look at this article written by Frank Chung from news.com.au. A senior diplomat warns Australians who make enemies of China will be cast aside in history. Now, is this the Chinese way of saying we'll be on the wrong side of history? It could be. That's not threatening at all. Fantastic. It's really what you want. A lot of this is posturing and hopefully won't materialize into anything real, but there you go. There you go. And so, a senior Chinese diplomat has warned that people in Australia who choose to make enemies of China will be cast aside in history. Speaking at the Lunar New Year dinner in Canberra on Monday night, China's deputy head of mission Wang Xing defended the country's handling of the outbreak and hit at our media organizations in particular, saying there were some people in Australia who choose to make enemies to sustain a living, and that they had brainwashed the public with negative portraits of China, or it could just be having an understanding of some of the historical atrocities that the dictatorial regime in China has implemented. If anything, Europeans should apologize to China. There is one thing we should really feel guilty of, and particularly I think a lot of Germans, introducing them this Marxist disease spread around the world. History will prove that it is wise and visionary to be China's friend, and your children and grandchildren would be proud of you to be China's friend, and they will benefit from the relationship with China, Mr. Wang said, according to a transcript of the speech posted on the Chinese embassy website. Those who deliberately vilify China and sabotage the friendship between our two countries and do damage to our long-term friendship and benefits out of their sector or selfish interests will be cast aside in history. And this is after all of the trade embargoes and restrictions that China has placed on so many exports from Australia. Of course. Their children will be ashamed of mentioning their names in history. Well, at least we'll have more children than the one you are only allowing people to have there for such a long period of time. And now it's funny, not enough wives for all the men. That's probably the biggest risk that China actually has. A whole bunch of men with no chance to make a family. Mr. Wang, who last made public remarks more than 6 months ago with a rare speech at the National Press Club, which was hosted by the Australia-China Business Council at Ruby Chinese and Dixon, a restaurant once owned by movie star Jackie Chan's father. The diplomat thanked the business leaders for their help during the pandemic, particularly in securing personal protective equipment when China was in urgent need in January and February last year. Remember that? When people were going around buying PPE here in Australia, boxing it up and shipping it to China. So this is the thing, everyone. When you've got quite an authoritarian political system there and a non-compatible political system to ours. To our disappointment, what the media cared and focused on was the so-called hoarding of PPE by Chinese-related companies, which led to shortages of PPE at that time. These claims ran rampant at certain times, Mr. Wang said. However, it finally turned out that all these claims were not true, and some of the reports amounted to libeling and were brought to lawsuit for defamation. But the damage had been done. The image of China's friends in Australia was severely harmed and smeared. Well, let's see if what the outcome was. Mr. Wang said it was becoming difficult to be China's friend in Australia, saying that only politicians who took a stern face against China could win the heart of the Australian population. Currently, the friends of China are given a nickname, Panda Hugger, he said. It used to be a word of appreciation, but now it carries derogatory meanings. It seems that being friendly to China, to be a friend to China, becomes a sin and a mistake in Australia. Have you heard of that, guys? I haven't heard of that one. In his National Press Club remarks last August, Mr. Wang accused Prime Minister Scott Morrison of stabbing China in the back by calling for an independent inquiry into the origins of the virus and insisting it did not originate in Wuhan. Sure. Speaking at the dinner on Monday, you've got to agree with what the party says, comrade, don't you? Speaking at the dinner on Monday, Mr. Wang addressed the claims of Australian virus expert Professor Dominic Dwyer. who was part of the World Health Organization investigation team, which recently returned from the virus epicenter. While the WHO team did not definitely declare China as the source of the virus, following his return, Professor Dwyer said he believed COVID-19 started in China. He appeared to push back on the Chinese government's claim the virus started overseas, saying the evidence was actually very limited and not really very good. I mean, who cares? Here's the thing. Who cares if it started overseas? It blew up in China. It doesn't matter if it started overseas. It blew up in China and spread from there. It's not really irrelevant. They're just trying to save political face. But Mr. Wang said Professor Dwyer was misquoted and highlighted an article he wrote for The Conversation in which the expert said the frozen food hypothesis had not been ruled out and that it was extremely unlikely the virus escaped from a lab. Well, I mean, here's the thing, guys. This is going to happen more and more when human population growth expands and we encroach on more natural environments, more undisturbed environments where we're closer to animals. That's what it's going to happen. It'll keep going until we reach peak population in 2050. Then I'd imagine it will decline as our population declines. Murdoch's News Corporation, who claimed the virus must have leaked from a biological institute from Wuhan, said nothing about Mr. Dwyer's interview and his impressions about the trip, Mr. Wang said. He said that in the face of COVID-19, the best strategy was to step up our collaboration, but that collaboration had come under a series of suspicions from a small number of unnamed people. Based on my observations, most of the people are siphoning off Australia's financial coffer, and they squander on the cornucopia, which is the hard-won product of the majority of the Australian labour force, he said. Really? They abuse the power in their hands to strike hard on China's friends in Australia, who were working so hard to enhance Australia's economic power, improve people's living standards, and store potentially for the future development. When these people were barking loud, our friends had to bite the bullet. Okay. You'll see a lot of people who are critical of, foreign investment in property here in Australia. And now they'll be saying, I've got another article we'll look at probably tomorrow about foreign investment coming back, Hong Kong, America, not China, not mainland China, the UK. But I looked at these figures and there was significant amount of more investment from the US than from China, mainland China coming into Australia. But the Chinese investment was a greater number, so it was smaller individual units. So that means more people were coming in and buying. What do you think is going to have more of an impact on the average punter, maybe getting into the housing market? A huge Bechtel mine funded by Americans, or 2,000 people competing you for apartments? Mr. Wang said the excuse for such suspicion is China's threat to Australian sovereignty and security, which is totally ridiculous, claiming there was no one single case that had been substantiated or supported by evidence. He also obliquely addressed China's alleged genocide and shocking human rights abuses against the Uyghur ethnic minority in the northwest Xinjiang region. Maybe you don't fully agree with our model of governance and administration, but at least you respect and understand the reason behind our development path and model of governance, he said. I think you are as bewildered as I am that the impression of China is so different between what you get in Australia and in China. Well, probably because we're not getting a party-controlled news source. I mean, it's we all have heard about the Cultural Revolution. People know about that, don't they? They know about the atrocities that have happened historically in China. What about the one-child policy? What about the forced abortion policy? That's common knowledge, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that is common knowledge to everybody around the world now. Do people not know that? Do kids not know that these days? Because I've met average Australians, normal Australians, the plumber I had here to, unclog a pipe. He was advocating for a Chinese-style political system here in Australia. He was frustrated with just the BS that goes on here and said, we need it just like China, just with strong leadership, with one party. And I said, you want it to be slow and a pain in the ass here in Australia because it could be much worse. Think about if the people that you hate have complete authority over you. You'd have no recourse. That's concerning to people. Is that not common knowledge? Let me know in the comments, everyone. Because I find it funny when people are defending, the Chinese government system or say it's only a different culture. When there are some absolutes, there are certainly some absolutes. You know, you can argue forced abortions onto people for population control. I would say that's inappropriate. And that's absolute. That should be universally accepted. You can argue it from a theological perspective. You can argue it from a non-aggression principle perspective. You can argue it from an economic perspective. So he cited Jerry Gray, a British-born Australian citizen living in China, who has appeared in Chinese state propaganda denying claims of ethnic cleansing. Recently, I watched a video on YouTube. There is Australian Uncle Jerry Gray. He and his wife went a bicycle ride in Xinjiang. Mr. Wang said after he came back, he told his friends about what he saw in the experience in Xinjiang, and few people would believe in him. Yes, but yeah, of course not. I mean, even if this isn't the case, there's enough historical precedent for us not to trust the Chinese government with regards to their human rights record. I'm not saying that Australia is any better. This is the thing, everyone. Governments are the biggest risk overall. If you look historically, and the socialists, they tend to be the worst. You know, particularly when they start managing food production. Oh boy. Mr. Wang again blamed the media, saying he had been told by one participant of the Colombo Plan, an intergovernmental exchange program designed to strengthen relationships in the region, that his one-year stay in Shanghai was a life-changing experience. But so many people in Australia, unlike you, haven't gotten the opportunity to visit China, he said. If these people are immersed by those negative portrayals of China by the major media outlets and brainwashed by the vulgarized and simplified political slogans, how would they understand China and agree with your assessment and impressions of China? Well, this is true. A lot of people haven't visited China. I don't know if I'll go back. You know, we went to Hong Kong, very different. Went over to mainland, very different. Don't know if we can go back down, can we? He added, we have a saying that goes, those who wrong people know better than the victims how wrong they are. And I believe those who vilify China know better than the Chinese people why they vilify China. So what do you think, everyone? A subtle threat or a warning, or just the sign of the continuing deteriorating relationship between Australia and China? I think our dependency on one other country whose political system is so starkly different from ours, well, does open us up to some risks as a nation. What do you reckon? As always, thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and enjoy the content I create here, there are a few ways you can support us. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links from Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or AussieBroadband. You can buy merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.